My brother took more than just my girlfriend from me. He took a part of my life I thought was untouchable. He was confident I would stay silent. But that was his first and last mistake. When all his dirty secrets surfaced, we both knew there was no turning back. Now, listen to what happened next. My name is Zach. I'm 23. Up until recently, I was, well, a pretty ordinary guy who believed life was at least somewhat fair. I had a decent evening job, college classes, and most importantly, a girlfriend. Laura was a true gem. Smart, beautiful, with a smile that could melt even the coldest heart. She's 22 and was my main support. But as it turned out, the support wasn't exactly mutual. Funny how I always thought I had one constant in my life, even if he wasn't the easiest person to get along with. My older brother, Nate. He's 27 and kind of the star of our family. Charismatic, successful, and arrogant to the core. Nate was the type to inspire admiration and mild disdain all at once. You'd think someone like that would have your back, right? Yeah, I thought so too, until one rainy night when everything went sideways. One day, I noticed that Laura was acting strange, like she'd swallowed a lemon just before seeing me and was now pretending she didn't care. I tried to figure out what was wrong, but all I got in response was silence, like she'd put up some famous wall of silence. At first, I thought maybe she was just having a bad day, or maybe I'd forgotten something. Though no, I don't usually do that. I tried to keep the conversation going, but she just gave me short, modest answers. You know how that looks? Like she was keeping me on a short leash so I couldn't get close. And that's when I had my first thought. Something's definitely wrong. Then things got really strange. I got home after work, drenched to the bone, trudging through the downpour that started as soon as I left. And there was Laura, standing by the door, looking serious with something wild and almost grim in her eyes. I walked in, took off my jacket, and she looked at me like she was about to air all my dirty laundry. "Zach," she said without giving me a second to catch my breath. "We need to talk." You know how that sounds when someone says, "We need to talk"? It's not like, "Let's discuss your day," or "Maybe decide where to go this weekend." It's more like, "The verdict is in," with a look like she's ready to toss me in the trash. She said she knew, that she knew I cheated on her. Buddy, I stood there frozen, and I had just one word running through my mind. "What? What are you even talking about?" I managed to say, though my voice sounded like I actually was hiding something. It's not easy to take it all in when you're accused of something you never did. "I know everything," she said, and the look she gave me was enough to crush me. "Nate told me he saw you with someone else. At the club, Zach, the club we always go to. He happened to see you with some girl. And you know, I believe him. He wouldn't lie to me." That's when it hit me like a tidal wave. Nate, my own brother, happened to see me at the club with some girl, getting cozy, and Laura believed him without a shadow of a doubt, without even asking me. Convenient, huh? And perfectly timed, no less. I had a storm brewing in my mind. First, there was shock. I tried to convince myself it was a mistake, a dumb misunderstanding, but the more I tried to find a way to explain to her that this was impossible, the more Laura looked at me like I was the last piece of garbage. And then it dawned on me. This wasn't just a rumor. This was a carefully planned scenario where I was cast as the bad guy. Do you know how painful that is? Looking at Laura, I realized that her trust in me had crumbled to dust. That night, I understood one thing. If my own brother decided to play cheap tricks, this farce of jealousy and lies, he had no idea what I was capable of. So, I found myself alone. Laura with Nate, as if my life had turned into some tearjerker soap opera, where the hero always suffers and the villains are smugly happy. Well, if my dear brother thinks he can steal my girlfriend and paint me as the bad guy, he hasn't realized who he's dealing with. Forgive? Oh, that's not me. The next few days I spent going over every moment Laura and I shared, replaying Nate's words, his endless talks about honesty, loyalty, and all that philosophy he so shamelessly betrayed. At first it was just painful, but the more I thought about it, the more genuine fury boiled inside me. And what made it worse was that Nate, apparently, saw himself as the hero of some romantic action flick. He wasn't even shy about showing off his deed. Laura by his side, him as the noble protector, saving her from me, the liar and the traitor. All right, brother, let's play. First, I decided to dig up a few things Laura had so conveniently forgotten. Like her exes, for instance. Yeah, you heard that right. Why reinvent the wheel when Laura's got a past she had run from when she found me? Let's start small. I quietly gathered the contacts of two of her previous boyfriends, Jason and Tom. And that's when my real hunt began. Jason was the popular type, one of those guys who never misses a chance to brag. If he suddenly started talking to Laura again, it would stir up quite a bit of gossip. He had a reputation and loved to showcase his life, so Laura was sure to end up in the spotlight. Oh yes, he was exactly the guy I needed to kick things off. Then there was Tom. Tom was a special case. She dated him a while back when she was first dipping her toes into serious relationships. Let's just say this guy left a huge emotional mark on her. The breakup was a nightmare, and they parted on bad terms. Rumor has it she couldn't get over him for quite a while, which means he'd have a starring role in my little show too. So, here was the plan. I'd make sure she ran into them again. Just like that. Accidentally, of course. Let those old feelings resurface. Bring back the memories I needed her to relive. Because after all, the more chaos in Laura's head, the harder it would be for her to cling to the fairy tale image Nate painted for her. Now, it was just a matter of waiting for the perfect moment. Nate and Laura didn't have a clue this would be the beginning of their end. A day off, the sun is shining, and here I am sitting in a cafe, carefully arranging the chess pieces of my plan. Laura thinks I invited her here to apologize. That, we're adults, and I need to bring closure. And yes, I flat out said I was guilty, especially if that's what she wanted to hear. But of course, my sincerity was only as genuine as a plastic jewel trying to pass for a diamond. I sit, waiting calmly, coffee ordered, and somewhere nearby is Jason, her ex number one, smirking like he's about to be called on stage for a long-awaited Oscar. Laura's late, that's new, but then she walks in, sits down, and gives me a look like I've just delivered a lecture on life in the last few seconds. But all I said was, "Hi, glad you could make it." "Zach, let's keep it short. Why did you want to meet?" she says right off the bat. Her tone is as dry as a desert, and if I once thought Laura was the epitome of tenderness, now I see that this woman could freeze water with a glance. I launch into my story about how I'm sorry, how I'm ready to take the blame, watching her openly bored expression, like she's being drilled with some pointless monologue. And then, Jason appears. Oh, it was like magic. She tensed immediately, as if she'd seen a ghost. He walks confidently to our table, like he owns the world, sits next to her, and pretends it's as casual as stopping by the store for bread. "Oh, Jason. Hey, how's it going? Long time no see." I add fuel to the fire with the friendliest smile I can manage. And that's when the show begins. Laura's nervous, doesn't know where to look, but tries to act like everything's under control, like it's no big deal. Meanwhile, Jason, with perverse joy, dives into the conversation. "Oh, Laura, you look fantastic. Remember those nights?" he says, with a grin that suggests those nights were perhaps the best of her life. Laura turns red, and it was wickedly amusing. She's trying to act like getting up and leaving would be beneath her, but the panic in her eyes is plain. She's glued to her seat, and every sentence from Jason knocks her off balance a bit more. He recalls their walks, jokes about those special days, and I, a dutiful observer, just listen and smile. "Yeah, time sure flies, doesn't it?" I comment, while Jason recounts another story about their road trip, where they nearly drowned in a lake. Laura's expression changes, as if it's just a funny story, but there's a flicker of despair in her eyes. She clearly wants to shut it all down, but can't figure out a way to gracefully end the conversation. And I, of course, play along. "Wow, Jason, I had no idea you guys had so many adventures. Laura, you never told me about this. Laura tries to mutter. That was a long time ago, through gritted teeth, but even she knows there's no point in justifying it. Jason won't let up. It's like he's on autopilot, recounting all their fun moments, and honestly, it was the best show I'd seen in years. When it finally ended, Laura bolted up and stormed out without a word. I half expected her to have a full-on breakdown. It was spectacular. Watching her perfect world shatter, seeing all those years of decency and honesty turn against her. And then I got a message from Nate. He was furious. The moment he found out I'd met up with Laura and her ex, he nearly had a meltdown. It was so satisfying to see my plan falling into place. Laura rattled, Nate on the edge. And this was only the beginning. After that accidental run-in with Jason, it seemed like Laura started to rethink things. The confidence in her eyes was replaced by a hint of panic, like someone who'd realized their perfect picture might not be so perfect after all. She began avoiding Nate, and honestly, that was the best part of the plan, watching a crack sneak into their perfect relationship. And I was right there, ready to widen that crack into a chasm. Meanwhile, Jason re-entered the stage. And let me tell you, he's the kind of guy you need to keep an eye on. It turns out our hero still had a whole archive of messages from Laura, where she'd spilled her thoughts and dreams, the kind that would tarnish her current saintly image. To say those messages had details would be an understatement. They were a whole skeleton collection, locked away in the closet of her past. There was everything. Dreams of having it all, manipulations she'd pulled on Jason, and even some notes about my perfect qualities, which she praised as if I were her favorite collection piece. No wonder she'd erased him from her life. So, I casually suggested that Jason show me their old messages. A couple of minutes of persuasion. And there I was, staring at full excerpts of her letters. Well, a few screenshots for my personal collection later, and I had my next play ready. It was time to pass on this information. Of course, I wasn't about to hit her directly with this honest letter. No, I just sent Nate a few screenshots with some subtle hints. Something like, "Oh, do you know more about your perfect girlfriend than I thought? Here, take a look. She's always been..." Well, you get it. A few minutes later, and Nate was right there. His reaction? Absolutely priceless. I'd never seen him so baffled before. He read through the messages a couple of times, like he couldn't believe his eyes. And there I stood, innocent as a baby, watching his confidence melt away like ice under the sun. You could see it on his face. He was lost. It was hilarious to think that his perfect girlfriend wasn't so perfect after all. Now Nate was starting to doubt. He literally didn't know what to do next, and you could see the conflict written all over his face. And me? I was just savoring the show, because honestly, seeing him so rattled was the best reward for all this drama. And this is only the beginning. Well, it was time for the second act of my little show. Time to bring Tom onto the stage, Laura's second ex and a real drama expert. I set everything up to make it look as accidental as possible. This time, I invited Laura to a party with our mutual friends, where, as I told her, our entire circle was supposed to be there. Then I whispered to Tom, "Hey man, Laura's going to be there." He didn't hesitate for a second, agreeing to come as if he'd been waiting for this chance. Laura arrives, and who's by her side? Of course, Nate. They look like the couple of the year. But then Tom shows up, and that was the moment. I noticed Nate flinch the second he saw Tom, like he realized that another ghost from the past was ready to spoil their perfect evening. Tom, wasting no time like a true hunter, made a beeline for Laura. He sat right next to her, launching into conversation with the enthusiasm of someone who hadn't seen her in ages, even though it had only been a year and a half, to be precise. Laura clearly didn't expect this. She barely had time to react before Tom had already started the conversation. "Laura, you look amazing, just like the old days when we were together, remember?" His voice was so sentimental that even I might have believed they'd had some sort of special bond. Laura could only nod, trapped between a rock and a hard place, and Tom started reminiscing about their days. Those golden times when Laura was his whole world. Her face showed pure confusion. She was trying to smile to appear indifferent, but she looked like she was living through her worst nightmare, one she couldn't wake up from. You know, Laura, remember that time we went to the mountains? How you freaked out on that scary bridge and I had to calm you down? Tom chuckled, and Laura squirmed, clearly wanting to escape, but the panic in her eyes was unmistakable. By now, Nate was getting seriously uncomfortable. I noticed his hand resting on her shoulder, as if trying to shield her, or maybe himself, from this awkward scene. But Tom ignored him completely, like he didn't even exist. And what about when we talked about moving in together? Tom continued, clearly not about to let their past go. I thought you were really serious about it, Laura. That was the last straw. Laura blushed furiously, and it was clear from her face that she just wanted to disappear. She looked at Nate as if pleading, "Get me out of this!" But Nate was frozen himself. The situation was completely out of his control, and I sat back, watching their meltdown as if it were the best movie of the year. They were the center of attention all night. Friends around noticed how Tom was sharing stories, while Laura and Nate grew increasingly red-faced, losing their composure bit by bit. It was perfect. A perfect disaster set in motion, with a simple invitation and a few well-placed memories. You know that feeling when you finally see your cunning plan come full circle and can just watch as everything falls apart? That was exactly the moment. Laura and Nate, the great avengers they fancied themselves to be, ended up neck-deep in their own mess. All their perfect relationship came crashing down in the same way it began, with deceit and betrayal. I wasn't even surprised when their circle of friends turned their backs on them. As the saying goes, you reap what you sow. Laura, who thrived on attention and all those adoring looks, was left without any support. One moment, she was the life of the party, the envy of her friends, and now, people started avoiding her like she carried some kind of virus. It seemed that, upon learning the truth, her friends decided they had enough toxicity in their lives. Her reputation was so tarnished, I imagine she'd even be afraid to step outside to the grocery store. And Nate? Oh, he took it a step further. The guy thought he could fool everyone and claimed that it wasn't what it looked like. He tried telling friends he was actually protecting Laura, that I was too harsh, but once all the facts were laid bare, his excuses looked like pathetic justifications. My friends had no intention of supporting him once they realized the lengths he'd gone to just to steal someone else's girlfriend. So, what's the outcome? Nate, a lone wolf who lost not only Laura but his social circle too, and Laura, the so-called queen with no kingdom left. She suddenly realized she'd been used, betrayed, and the ending turned out to be far harsher than she'd ever imagined. She lost me, and now Nate too. As strange as it sounds, this was the perfect conclusion to the whole story. In the end, everything came full circle. So, the pressure was mounting. Laura was more nervous than ever. 2 exes she thought she'd buried in the past were now back in her life, or more accurately, her worst nightmare. And Nate? He was walking around like he was lost in a maze. I could see him trying to keep a straight face, but his confidence was quickly fading. Well, it was time for the grand finale. At yet another party, I invited the 2 of them again. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, and I was almost amused to see them relaxed, apparently convinced that the whole Exes drama was behind them. How sweet, right? But I had a little dessert planned for them. When the party was in full swing and people were going wild on the dance floor, I finally approached Laura. She looked surprised, but deep down, I think she knew I hadn't come just to say hello. I smirked and almost casually said, "You know, the truth can be surprising, especially when it's hidden under a pile of lies. Did you really think I didn't know?" She froze, and her smile slowly morphed into an expression of sheer terror. I saw her eyes widen, like she'd just realized that none of this was random. The encounter with Jason, Tom showing up. It had all been orchestrated by me to shake her world down to the last grain of sand. "Zach, you knew all along?" she whispered, barely audible, like she was afraid someone else might overhear. I just smiled and leaned in slightly, whispering, "Every moment, Laura. Did you really think you could play me so easily? Time to find out what a real game looks like." Then I laid it all out for her. Screenshots of her intimate messages with Jason, old conversations with Tom, everything that showed her true colors. Her face turned pale, and her eyes darted around like a trapped animal. But the best part was yet to come. I told her that Nate had received the same gifts. Laura started panicking. I could see her unraveling. Just then, Nate approached us, trying to understand what was going on. Laura started stammering, like she wanted to explain but didn't know how to do it without coming off as a complete liar. "Nate, darling, it's not what it looks like," she began, but I didn't let her finish. "Oh, come on, Laura," I said with sarcasm. "Haven't there been enough coincidences for you? And for you, Nate, you were so sure about your perfect girlfriend. Hope you enjoy the whole package of her past." At that moment, Nate realized there was no way out. All my evidence was laid out in front of him, each piece hitting him like a blade. He was so angry, he looked like he was about to explode. And me? Watching their chaos unfold was pure satisfaction. The plan was straightforward. Throw a party, gather all the right people, and finally make Laura feel the full force of her own past. I started quietly spreading rumors that Laura was back together, not with one, but two of her exes at the same time. Naturally, people picked it up faster than a wildfire in dry woods, and soon the news was circulating on every corner. Laura and Nate, meanwhile, had no idea what awaited them. And so, the party began. The atmosphere was electric. Familiar faces and friends gathered everywhere, ready for a night of fun, unaware that the evening promised to turn into a real show. I made sure both Jason and Tom would be there, and most importantly, that they were prepared for some friendly interaction with Laura. The plan was perfect. All I had to do was sit back and watch. Laura arrived, shining as always, dressed to impress like she was about to steal the spotlight. Nate was by her side, confident as ever, until Jason and Tom approached, both with expressions that suggested they were her closest friends. Laura tensed up at the sight of them, but Jason was already starting. "Laura, I thought you wouldn't recognize us. It's been so long," he said, his tone so friendly it was instantly unsettling. She stammered, but didn't get a chance to reply before Tom jumped in. "Oh, come on, Laura. Aren't you happy to see us? We went through so much together. Those were great times, weren't they?" Laura tried to muster something resembling a greeting, but she looked so flustered that her face was redder than a ripe tomato. And Nate? He tried to keep his cool, but his eyes revealed his irritation. "Guys," Nate attempted to take control, "maybe you could give Laura a break. We just wanted a calm evening." "Oh, calm? We're just chatting." Jason shrugged as if this were the most casual reunion of old friends. "By the way, Laura, remember that trip to Los Angeles, when we slept in the car on the beach?" he added, clearly relishing the moment. People around had started sneaking glances at the scene, and I could barely hold back my smile. The crowd whispered, exchanged looks, and speculated about what was going on. It was the perfect moment. Laura stood there, helplessly looking around, and it was clear her perfect image was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Realizing they were the center of attention, she tried to say something, but the words wouldn't come. "Laura, don't stress. We're just sharing memories," Tom continued, as if he truly didn't understand the problem. Nate tried again, more forcefully this time. "Hey, enough! She said she doesn't want to talk about this." And there it was, the moment of truth. Watching Laura desperately try to keep her composure, while Nate struggled to defend her, I knew the show had hit its mark. Now the rumors took off like rockets, as everyone around discussed her remarkable history with her exes. Laura and Nate were caught in the middle of a very public disgrace. My plan was complete. I stood off to the side, watching as they found themselves trapped by their own actions, and it was better than I could have imagined.